All right, the recording has begun and the room is open, so folks will be able to log in as we go forward. Welcome, my name is Victor McCraw. This is the second in a series of 3 webinars that the Treasure Valley branch of the NAACP has planned for 2022. As you can see on your screen there, this is a 3-part series. We're going to be discussing topics of relevance to Treasure Valley residents and residents of Greater Idaho, dealing with civil rights, social justice, DEI, which most of you have heard, diversity, equity, inclusion, and talk about ways in which underrepresented groups within our communities are being supported or not supported, and what we can do to help that, and where especially we can find resources. And with that, I will introduce our 3 panelists, and then I'll have them each in turn tell you a little bit about themselves. First, we have Andrea Orozco. She's the Senior Admissions Counselor and Multicultural Recruiter at Boise State University. We've also got Mario Pyle, formerly with Boise State University, now with University of Idaho, and he's the Director of the Black Cultural Center. We also have Phillip Thompson, the Executive Director of the Idaho Black History Museum. Andrea, why don't we start with you? Take a couple minutes, tell us about yourself, what you do, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Victor. Hello, everyone. Like Victor mentioned, my name is Andrea Orozco. I'm a Senior Admissions Counselor and Coordinator for Multicultural Recruitment for undergraduate admissions. In my role, I work with prospective students, their families, or anyone that's helping them through the process, through the admissions process, right? I work with students through the admissions process. I connect students to resources as far as financial aid, scholarships, learning about their next steps, learning about housing on campus, and the different ways students can be involved. I've been in this role for almost 7 years. And before this role, I graduated from Boise State. And then I also, I graduated from a local high school here, Centennial High School. And so I've lived here in Boise for about 20 years, originally from Mexico. And so very excited to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Mario, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. As I'm here on the west coast of Idaho time zone, so it's still morning here. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. As Victor said, I've recently taken a job here at University of Idaho, working and serving the student population that identifies and sees themselves as Black or African American. And what that looks like can be a host of ways, but the short answer for the introduction is I help try to provide a safe space, or safe enough space, for them to come feel like they have a space that looks like them and feels like home, and also help produce a sense of belonging. I've been in Idaho now about 15 years. I've served in different capacities and worked for different organizations. But I've primarily been here because I have a 12-year-old son who lives in Craigmont, Idaho. And so that's what helped motivate my move up here to Moscow. But I've also gotten the pleasure now serving 20 years, 6 years active duty, and now 14 years with the Idaho Air National Guard. And so that is what has kept me here in Idaho. I look forward to sharing more about the center and all the ways that the center is here to serve students, but also the faculty and staff on campus, and potentially, and hopefully, not potentially, but hopefully, the community at large.
Thanks, Mario. And Phillip, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
My name is Phillip Thompson. I work for the Idaho Black History Museum in Boise, Idaho. And we try to couple Idaho's rather unique Black history in comparison to Americans' Black history, because there's a big disconnect there. And most are not aware that Idaho is actually much more receptive to avenues that Blacks were able to use to get ahead. And we don't get credit for it, but then using those same approaches to kind of offer these same opportunities in the modern day to people of any ethnic persuasion, because those being with and without are no longer defined by their ethnic background. The socioeconomic stratification of society is much deeper than just the color of one's skin. It's an access issue, it's an education issue. And so we try to use the education and the history of Idaho to teach that historically, but then apply those same concepts, working with corporations, universities, et cetera, to do so in the here and now.
Great. I appreciate that. And before we get going, I just wanted to get the introductions out of the way and let a few folks log in who are logging in late, cover a little bit of housekeeping. We'd like all the participants to remain on mute. And we will be taking questions as questions come up in the chat. And there'll be a portion of time later on where we'll put those questions together if there are similar questions and see what we can ask the panelists if they haven't answered your questions as we go along in our presentation. To start off with, most of you are aware that just this last weekend, last Sunday, was what's called Juneteenth. It's now a federal holiday, and there are a lot of questions surrounding what in the world is Juneteenth, and what significance does it have today if it's this historical event that a lot of our communities haven't heard about or don't know a lot about. And I'll come right back to you, Phillip. If you could just give us a brief definition of Juneteenth, and even more importantly, what is its significance to us today?
So, I mean, not everybody, let's go ahead and quick and dirty the version is that Juneteenth was the day that the United States military went to Texas, forced compliance to the emancipation of slavery. Because one misheld fact is that people think that Texas hadn't gotten word. They had gotten word. Most slaves were well aware that it had been decided that it must be free. Simply the masters and the state of Texas, for the most part, just chose not to comply. So that precipitated the need to send federal forces, or the Army in this case, to the land to force compliance with the law. And also, it wasn't a case of like General Granger standing up and announcing to all that they'd been freed. He wasn't exactly a fan of the enslaved people either. They posted it around town on different places where most Blacks actually congregated. And it was odd because most of the slave masters actually had to read and convey the message to the slaves because it was illegal to teach a slave how to read. So I just want to clarify some of those historical misconceptions that we think of it as a much more grandiose writing in and freeing them. And it was an act of lack of compliance because they didn't know. And it was actually an act of defiance that Texas refused to comply to the order. And General Granger was simply acting as an agent of the U.S. military, not under his own benevolence. I mean, he was not a friend of any slave. And historically, it's recorded that he actually sent or caught slaves upon a time and sent them back to slave states if, in fact, they weren't legal, for lack of a better word. I just want to clarify that. And in the modern day, I think it's important now that we're acknowledging a part of America's history that is, in fact, just a part of our history, right? We need not focus on it ad nauseum. We need to focus on what we do from that moment of how do we deliver a people to become productive members of society and acquire the skill sets necessary to thrive. Most people seem to not think about that if you were a slave on Monday and then freed on Tuesday, during the reading of the order, the slaves were also encouraged to stay on site and go to work for their masters for wages, and they would not be compensated if they left these plantations, and they are not to leave to go to military installations to pick up compensation. They were encouraged to stay and become employees. And they didn't really have much of a choice. If you didn't have a skill set to do much of anything else, there's not a lot else you could do. In the South, you had New Englanders at the emancipation of slavery go down south and create schools, freedmen schools, to educate the newly freed slaves. And like the narrative for Blacks who attended these schools and thereafter are entirely different from Blacks who stayed in the South and didn't have access to these schools. I think that's the biggest point we need to emphasize, is that we need not talk endlessly about Juneteenth in itself. It's what are we going to do thereafter to deliver skill sets, goods, and education in whatever form to allow somebody to become self-sufficient. And that's as much true now in this supposed racial awakening that America is going through again. We're talking too much about bullet points and headlines as opposed to implementing actual courses of action that will allow any given people to provide for themselves if in fact they've not been allowed that chance up until this point.
Outstanding. And one of the avenues of creating or taking advantage of those opportunities, just as you said, historically, the lack of education, the lack of ability to even read that notice that was printed, to the establishment of schools, to modern day, where we are still struggling with some barriers to getting ahead or being prosperous in our society, very often linked to education. I'll go to you first, Andrea. Can you briefly tell us some of the, let's say, what are the top 3 barriers to taking advantage of education that you see in the students that you're helping?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's important to recognize the intersectionalities we see with our traditionally underrepresented students, right? And I think what we see here in Idaho is we see students also not only from traditionally unrepresented groups, but also students who identified and classified as a first generation student. And so understanding all of their options or how to access specific resources through an admissions process or while they're in school, I would say is one of the biggest challenges I see is really understanding what is available, not only within our institution, but even other institutions throughout the state, right? And then also, I would say many of the students that I'm working with are also one of the things that I see might be eligible for Pell Grants, right, or have financial need, and so navigating the financial aid and scholarship part of paying for college is something that I see with a lot of students, and so connecting them to resources, helping them navigate that process is really important. And then the other one is a sense of belonging, right, on the campuses. Oftentimes, students, they themselves might not say that, they recognize that at the very beginning, but as they make their way into their sophomore or junior year, that's when we begin to hear some of these experiences of not seeing themselves here on campus. And so I would say just first generation backgrounds, students who have financial need, and then that sense of belonging in the college campus. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. And Mario, your experience in 2 universities now, just recently, outside the Treasure Valley, I'm sure you'd agree with a lot of what Andrea just said. What do you also see that you see as being, I'll use the word universal? You're seeing the same issues at another university, and what are you dealing with there?
Yes, and that's such a great question. And I'll preference it with this statement that predominantly white institutions, PWIs, were not built with Black and brown people in mind. So that's a barrier just off from 21 Jump Street, basically. It's not, institutionally, it's not built with Black and brown people in mind at all. And so that is a significant barrier just to the structure, the buildings, the admissions process, as Andrea said, the financial aid concept, the piece, but we'll take it to the representation. What representation do we see in our universities that would indicate to Black and brown students that they are not only seen, valued, and loved, but that their whatever skill sets they bring to the table can help enhance the university to grow. And that dynamic is a barrier in of itself because we don't have any representation. And when I say representation, let me be very clear, has the power or authority to make decisions based on policy, procedures, and that directly affect the direction that a university goes. We don't have that. And that in itself is a barrier, which leads to a sense of belonging, finding spaces in which you can explore and live out, especially living out. What does Blackness look like? Blackness can be very fluid, and it's not captured in one definition or one particular group of people within the Black community. The Black community is very diverse, and being able to cater. And when I say diverse, I mean ranging from the broad spectrum of African Americans, Caribbean folks who are African or who are Black but don't see themselves as African American, and then those from Africa, which is a continent. So even the different countries within Africa coming here to America to go to school, being served and being met where they're at, versus thinking we're going to cover all Black folks with the very generalized concepts and dynamics. That's not allowing us to be the people we are to this world and to what we can bring to the table. So I would say those are very large dynamics that in of themselves, we could break each one down to those barriers themselves.
Excellent insights. Diversity within diversity.
Yes.
Which it takes mental processes and a little bit of emotional energy to think about and to deal with folks on that level. You made an interesting comment earlier, Mario. You said, as they see themselves, the students as they see themselves. We on the outside go by appearances, vocal inflections or accents, and we categorize folks. They may not see themselves that way. And in the end, the most important thing is how they see themselves. And I'll use that to segue to the fact that, we've just gotten over 2 years of COVID. There's a lot of new normal that people are talking about. There's a lot of reskilling and upskilling of adults getting back into the education environment, or back into the workforce, or different jobs within the workforce, not just high school students transitioning to college or university. So I'll start back with you, Phillip. Just within the community, post-COVID, what challenges have you seen with folks getting ahead or putting themselves or maintaining themselves in a position where they're continuing to be prosperous?
I think like locally, and this is just much more specific to Boise and the greater, Boise metro area, it's this confluence of exorbitant costs that we've never before seen, as far as like just the average housing price, rental price, etc. It has gone beyond what anybody could ever foresee in the Boise area, right? So even though jobs are paying quite a bit more, I saw a sign of the day for a fast food place paying $14 or $15 an hour, begging people to apply. That, unless you're working like 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week for the most part, won't afford you a single bedroom apartment in Boise. I mean, the average rent now is like $1,200 for a single bedroom apartment. The reality of that is being inflicted upon everybody, but those who are socioeconomically towards the bottom, that in many cases are minorities, people of color, as they say, or are Blacks, are going to be disproportionately affected. As it stands in Idaho, like we did a COVID food delivery service during the first few months of COVID, coordinating with soup kitchens. It was mind blowing the amount of people and the cultural, the ethnic diversity who were in need, because those who were first to lose their jobs were those at the bottom, right? And the service sector are typically underrepresented or undereducated. And so you're the first one fired, last one hired. They were affected rather quickly. And if they didn't have access to, whether it be a safety net via a religious source or church or friends or whatever, they were just left hanging out because there wasn't a process in place to serve them. Hence why we went about just like, hey, we worked with a couple different institutions, built a quick little app, et cetera, et cetera. We were able to serve like 244 families. That's not a point of braggadocio or what we did being great. It's a point to illustrate how bad things can get quickly. And if you don't have a system in place to react quickly to serve those people, you're out of luck. While we're worrying, thinking, wasting time, plotting, devising, and scheming on what we're going to do, how we're going to serve this population, you've got to just do proof of concept and get it rolling, and then change it as it goes. Have this iterative change from like a processing perspective, as opposed to waiting until you have it perfect and rolling out. I think the same thing holds true in the modern day. We've got to continue to address the issue, but be willing to change with the times as that need changes. What we were doing 6 months ago or 18 months ago or 12 months ago is not going to work now, because prices have still continued to increase. People are still moving to Boise. You still have a growing population of the disaffected. So how are we going to each tangibly probably take a piece of that pie and remedy it? That's what it all comes down to. I mean, it's got to be action oriented as opposed to discussion.
I like that. I like that phrase, action oriented. Where are we going? What is the goal? What are we accomplishing? And I'll come back to you, Andrea. One of the big things is student debt. Upskilling, reskilling, or I don't know what you call it with brand new students, new skilling. But coming out of your educational process with knowledge and skills you need to get these jobs, or I would say compete for these jobs. It's not a guarantee that you will get them. What are you seeing as far as the generational diversity of your students, and what's being seen in general across the United States as a burden of student debt?
Victor, what I see typically more in the recruitment side, especially in the last few years, students are very mindful about the cost of higher education and the value of higher education, right? We are seeing juniors and seniors asking us the question of, what is the value of this, degree? Am I going to be able to pursue an advanced degree? Am I going to be able to go into specific careers? And then students also want to know overall, like the costs, right? They want to talk numbers, and sometimes they themselves don't necessarily know the questions, but just through conversations, I gather that they really want to know what is going to be my bottom line cost. And so I think on the recruitment side, it has been really important for me to really talk about what is the value of higher education, not just in the aspect of going out and being able to pursue a specific career or an advanced degree, but the experiences that come with being at a university, meeting with folks from diverse backgrounds, being involved, finding the passion, maybe with community-based organizations. But then at the same time, really talking to students, what is the bottom line cost of the university, right? And then with that, we're also talking about what is the financial aid available, possibly through the federal financial aid application like FAFSA. What are the scholarships available through the university? What are scholarships available through the community? Or even what are some of the scholarships available through the state, like the Idaho Opportunity Scholarship, which is a state scholarship. Now, in those conversations, we're also talking to students about different pathways to achieving a degree, right? And for some students, that might be starting at a community college within their area. We work very closely with College of Western Idaho, College of Southern Idaho, College of Eastern Idaho, and College of Northern Idaho to meet students where they're at, because students might be making the decision to start at a community college to offset the overall cost. But right now, I would say that a big conversation is also the cost of living, like Phillip mentioned. I know the cost of living here in Boise continues to increase, and it's something that for many of our students, it's a concern. So I think for me, it really is having as many conversations with the students and their families or whoever's helping them through the process of what is the value of higher education and what is the bottom line cost. And then making sure that they know the resources on campus, like the Career Center, that's going to help them connect to possible internships or possible jobs after they graduate.
Okay. And having completed a master's degree at Boise State myself, I'm still paying off my student debt. And I'm looking at, building on skills from a career. I've already had my career and I'm getting into some new things. Mario, you spent time in the Air Force, and here you are working with students at universities. And who knows, in 5 years, you may be doing something else. You may be in a leadership position within the university. You may be in private. With your skills, you could make a pretty penny in the private industry. So, as Andrea mentioned, what is the what is the true value of this education that we're getting? What is your perspective, especially as we're looking at adults who are coming into this the educational setting, trying to create more opportunities for themselves later in life?
Right. I think that dynamic of itself, measuring value and figuring out value, is imperative. And I know this is like not allowed to be said from someone coming into higher education, but higher education isn't the track or the model for every student. And I think we're afraid to say that sometimes, because we think by saying it, students won't come to universities, but that's just not true. I think we just need to be honest that the pathway to success, first of all, we have to redefine what success looks like. And I think that's how you will be able to measure the value of whether or not higher education fits what you want to do in life. And we have to start that, I think, even younger than high school, getting kids to think about what is success, what values matter to you, and what things what things matter to you in this world. And that can change, and letting them know those dynamics can change. As you said, Victor, I spent 6 years active duty, switched over to Air National Guard, and I realized the military wasn't all that I wanted to do, and I started working with at-risk youth, even though I don't like that term, at risk. Working with youth, and I think getting our students, to even the students I work with, understanding that access to success starts with what they value. And you can't value getting a higher education degree if that's not part of your values. And I mean values much more than just simply one word like compassion, integrity. No. I mean the full development of what things really make you who you are and guide you and lead you in the direction that you want to go. I think those things need to be discussed even at higher education levels, as you're assessing. And I think, going back to the sense of belonging, that is where community really is built. So you're looking at your decisions from an individualistic standpoint, but also a community-based understanding of what's best for the community as well. I think all those different dynamics leading to what values and to what you do and how you make those decisions going forward, and realizing, sometimes things aren't necessarily about the end goal, but the access and the opportunities that present themselves, because we can't define the outcome. We can't set up the outcome so much so that we determine it, but what we can determine is access. And access, to me, looks very uniquely, importantly, and different in the sense that many of my students may not know that there's a private industry, or the development of nonprofit, or taking your skill sets, the soft skills and hard skills, and mixing those together to create a business. And also this dynamic of international. I think sometimes we get so tunnel focused on just here, and not realizing we're a community, an international community, thanks to social media. So using that, I mean, there's things that could be done overseas, and now you don't necessarily have to travel or get on a plane and fly all the way over to that country or city outside of the United States. We can do things. Look, we're on Zoom. I'm here in Moscow, Idaho. We're all in different places in our houses or offices, and just being able to capture that. And I think that value must be that formula for that value is really not one way and set one way. We can figure out the variables, and I think it's taking time for each student to figure out what those variables are, to understand if this is a value for them.
Victor, you're on mute. I have to interrupt you. Victor, you're on mute. You have to start again.
Thank you. I must have hit my space bar by accident. Good comments, Mario. I particularly like the word access I've been using the word opportunity, but you need access even before opportunity. And then to take that opportunity, remembering my parents, I guess it was a warning. Hey, you're going to face some challenges that the people sitting next to you aren't, because you look different. So, it's going to be tougher. It's going to be harder. You may or may not have access. You may or may not have opportunity. And then they quickly follow that up with, don't let us ever catch you using that as an excuse. It is what it is. We are a little over half an hour in. I'd like to remind our folks who have tuned in, feel free to type your questions into the chat. You've got an idea of the expertise and knowledge of our panelists. If there's something that you think that they may be able to answer for you, go ahead and type that in, and we'll get to those questions as we go along. Phillip, I'd like to come back to you. In general, in lines of what we're talking about, opening doors of opportunities that were not available, at least in Texas, until 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Building upon that and where we're at today, opening these doors of opportunity, what important trends do you see in your work here in the Treasure Valley that you think our audience should be aware of?
The biggest thing is, I'm 45 years old, be 46. Boise, Idaho in 2022 is ripe with opportunities and access at a level that is exponentially greater than when I was in college, et cetera, et cetera. You didn't have the same opportunities. That's why everybody left. I went to University of Texas. Everybody left school, then came back, if in fact they're for the opportunity, because there was nothing here on the economic standing, right? As it stands currently, the vast number of businesses that are setting up shop in Boise or Meridian or the greater Boise metro area, each time that happens, that's an economic opportunity, not just for Idaho, not for Boise, but for students on any place in that spectrum. One disconnect that I see is it's happening a lot at Boise State, but not as much as it could, because you got two institutions trying to deal with each other, so it's always a problem. We could create a pipeline of students with or without college or a junior college or community college education if we work with some of these larger employers on all ends of the spectrum. You've got like Albertsons is a company we work with quite a bit, because they can employ the kid from age 16 when they're starting to learn the skill set, learning how the stores work, learning the most basic things, or at a foundational level on the technology level. Maybe they're doing tech support, maybe they're doing something at an office level, but that company is so large and has so much operation now reinvested in Boise, Idaho. There are opportunities all along the spectrum there that doesn't necessarily necessitate a degree. Working with CWI, they're working with organizations to come up with certain, certificate programs. I work with the police as well. We're exploring ideas with that, because police officers have to have so many credits in order to be on the force. You're well aware that we're facing a dearth of police officers that can even serve in the greater Boise metro area due to lack of lateral transfers because of the cost of living and the stringent guidelines that we go by to hire. So we have to create a way to afford people the opportunity to serve by making an education opportunity that, hey, perhaps it's a contingency hire, perhaps it's you take these 12 credits, then we get you in for the back end, whatever it might be. We've got to be much more creative about how are we going to fill the needs that exist in the fastest growing city in America, one of the fastest, in real time, with real-time solutions, as opposed to just talking about it and kicking the can down the road, or relying only upon these, I'm not besmirching the institutions, but these large institutions such as U of I, College of Idaho, Boise State University, because they don't have the nimbleness, because they're a huge organization, to offer that solution that quickly. I'm not mocking them or dogging them. I'm simply saying that other institutions need to step up, working with corporate, public, private entities to make that happen. And in Idaho, I've noticed that it's much easier, and those in power and those with the ability to do so are much more open to those ideas and having those conversations than I would think they would be in a much larger city, simply because we don't have those degrees of separation to the extent that you do in major metro markets. I was with one person today who owns like literally 32 companies in Boise, and we're having this very discussion about how do we fill this need to fill these jobs, but then not have the kids incurring debt and kind of giving up and feeling hopeless. And instead making, whether it be apprenticeship programs, whether it be certificates, whether it be whatever, to get them in those jobs and give them the skills that the companies actually need. Because we also have a disconnect between what's coming out of the universities and what the companies need. We've got to keep those two ends talking more readily, as opposed to reinventing the wheel once we realize there's a problem. I apologize for going on and on.
No, that's a great perspective. And Andrea, he sets me up for what I'm going to be asking you. I like that, the concept of untapped opportunity, and the fact that opportunity here, especially in Treasure Valley, is infinitely more than what Phillip has seen historically. So here's a question: is there a disconnect between what students want to do, what they want to be when they grow up, and what they are going to be capable of, or where the actual need of the jobs are? Is there a disconnect?
Victor, I don't know if I'm the person at the university that can speak more on like the students that are graduating. I'm really meeting more of the students at the recruitment and outreach side of things. But what I can say is that when I am working with students, whether they're transferring or I'm meeting them at a high school, that career exploration has, in some cases, is very limited, right? Depending on the high school that they go to, they might have the opportunity to work maybe with a career counselor to learn about the different opportunities that they would have after high school or after college. But in some instances, some students have their understanding of even potential college degrees is very limited, right? Of like, I worked with students that say, well, I can, maybe major in education, engineering, health, or business, and that's it, right? And then when I begin talking to them and letting them know, actually, we offer over 200 majors and minors. And, with this specific major, these are all the possible careers that you can go into. It really opens their eyes to, okay, there's the different careers and majors that they can go into. So major exploration is something that I have always seen as something that not every student has had the opportunity to do in their high school. And so for me, it's really much like, let's plant the seed. Let's make sure that the students know that they don't have to make that decision right as they start at Boise State, or at any institutions, but that it's something that they should be exploring during their time here, right? We know that about 10% of the students will enroll undecided or undeclared, right? Because they don't know what degree they want to go into. But then we also know that anywhere from 30 to 40% of the students will change their major. And that's not a bad thing, right? It just means that maybe they've taken a class that has opened their eyes to a possible, new degree or a possible career. So I would say on my end, it's more of like, how do I provide more access to major exploration? Because a lot of the times we know that students are getting more of that hands-on experience during an internships, but I don't know how accessible internships are in the high schools, right? Some high schools might have some opportunities to explore careers, whereas some of their high schools might not, right? And then that comes back to understanding that a lot of our traditionally underrepresented students also identified as first generation. So within their families or their networks or communities, they might not have someone to talk to about what can I do with this specific degree or this specific career.
Okay. And I did a program in Arizona before I came to Idaho with underrepresented students called the ACE program. First generation, if they finish this program, especially if they were going into STEM, they were going to get money for their college degree. Again, deciding what they wanted to do. My undergraduate degree, I had already been working for several years. I think I had almost 20 years on. And I knew what I was going to be doing. I knew what my degree was going to be in. And the university actually told me, you're not going to get rich doing this. these skills are going to put you in an occupation that's not going to make you rich. So just go into it knowing that. I already knew that because I was already in the occupation of law enforcement, like Phillip was talking about. I don't know that I could have afforded to move to Boise, to be in the Boise Police Department because it's so expensive. So all good points. Mario, I'll ask you the same type of question. What do you see as far as students and coming in? What degree programs are getting into, and what are their prospects for making good on their new skill and knowledge?
I think if we take even a step back from such a good question, all these great answers and this dynamic. So, because I don't want to repeat what both my colleagues have said, because they've spoken very well and eloquently on the situation. If we take a step back, what would be the motivation to stay? I don't know if we've ever asked. I don't know if we're asking that question. Why stay? We just assume because I think it's great, you should think it's great. And then if you don't think it's great, I make you feel bad for not thinking it's great. What's the motivation for someone to stay? We're asking someone to do something maybe that's contrary to their values and who they are, what they want to accomplish. We also talk about, go see the world, explore the world, get a taste of a different culture. That's what some people are doing, and then we fault them for that. And then we take in the dynamic of rising prices. I mean, all these things play into that. I don't know if the problem that we think we have is actually a problem. I think we need to readdress what we think the actual problem is. Many of the students, one reason I was brought to U of I is to help stop the dropout rate, that only 25% of our students who are Black or African American are graduating. And so the question that was posed is, what do we need to stop that? And I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to look at the problem. Maybe the students are going somewhere better for themselves. Maybe they found a different path. Maybe they realize college isn't for them. And now we need to maybe find them a certificate program or something else to help them succeed. And so I think these conversations lead to what action steps should we take, and readdressing. We're saying we have a problem, but I think we're looking at the problem from a wrong lens, or not a wrong lens, but the lens that we're looking at is not the lens that we should be only limiting ourselves to. I think there's other lenses that we could be using to address and put action steps in place that would be helpful and useful, especially useful to the students that we serve.
I like the idea of the certificate program, much more affordable than a full degree, much more immediately useful, as Phillip brought up, a certificate to go into policing. One of the most unrepresented groups in policing is women. There's a national push, it's called 30 by 30. Get 30% female in law enforcement by 2030. Several agencies in Colorado have taken that up, taken up that challenge, and we'll see how well they do. But all good comments. Mary, do we have any questions from our folks tuning in that we'd like to pose?
We do have a couple questions, but really quickly, maybe if someone doesn't mind a follow-up for both Andrea and Mario. You talked about perhaps we're looking at the question the wrong way, or if it really is a problem. Perhaps one thing you two can speak to is recruitment. When you're doing the recruitment, isn't that something you should be addressing then? And how does Boise State, how does U of I address that so that you're, quote unquote, not sharing the value of an education, a degree, you're not wasting time, or you're providing the student with a different opportunity, a different door? We could start there, then we'll get into the three questions we have. And I know time check, we're about 12 minutes, but we've got a few things to go. But I would love to hear that a little bit more about, you have your recruitment, your retention to graduation, and then opportunities. We've touched a little bit on it, but maybe we can go a little further and then jump into, Christine had asked us something as well did Will.
Thank you, Mary. I can kick that off if you like. So I think one of the things to keep in mind when in regards to recruitment, And I feel like I can say not only within our university, but other colleges and universities in the state is we really are student focused. And so while when I'm meeting students and I'm hoping that they're choosing Boise State, ultimately I'm hoping that they're choosing the right option for them, right? And that might be at another institution or pursuing different programs, at another institution in Idaho or even outside of Idaho. And so I have the honor and the opportunity to build community and rapport with other admissions counselors at other institutions. And so if I'm talking to a student who might be interested in a field that maybe Boise State doesn't offer, then I'm able to connect them to my colleagues at University of Idaho or College of Western Idaho or Idaho State University. So that is one thing to keep in mind as we do recruitment. Now, the other thing is when there's two parts to recruitment. There's the recruitment part where we're out meeting with, let's say, high school seniors who have very specific to-do items during their senior year. Apply for admissions, apply for financial aid, register for orientation, apply for housing, right? And then there's also the outreach component where we might be talking to students that are younger than seniors in high school, maybe in the middle schools, or who we are meeting through community-based organizations. At that point, we're not necessarily going over steps on how to apply for admissions. It's more of like, here's the value of education. Our university can be an option for you. What are some things that you can do as you're finishing middle school or you're going into high school to prepare for college, right? And so there's the recruitment and outreach part of it. And then I would say also within recruitment, kind of going back to what I've mentioned before, is the partnerships with community-based organizations and community colleges, because we know not every student will decide to start at a four-year institution right out of high school. We know some folks will join the military, others will start at a community college, others might go into the workforce and then return to school. And so we want to make sure that we're meeting the students wherever they're at, and that we can provide programs that are not just, a full-time, schedule during a year, but we also know that some students might be going to school part-time, or now more than ever, we're seeing students turn to fully online or fully remote programs, right? And so really understanding what is it that those students need in order to earn their degree. And then the last thing I would say within recruitment is understanding that not every student, right, will come maybe with like a parent or a career counselor. And so recognizing the support that the student has or doesn't have, so that we can then build the support here at the university, whether it's with the admissions or the orientations office or student equity, as they make their way into the university.
Perfect, thank you. Another question from the participants, kind of a two-parter. Early on, Christine had asked us, where do the conversations about experience, internships come into play? Andrea or Mario had mentioned possibly weren't 100% sure of all the opportunities that were happening with internships, but we know there's career services on campus. But if either of you can speak to that a little bit, because it segues nicely into a question Will asked about who are those corporations, businesses, and owners in the area that not only are hiring, but have diverse membership as far as their leadership goes. And then how would you get these students, if you will, these graduating students into those companies, if you will? That means those segue together nicely. So kind of a bigger question there, but that's something we want to look at.
I guess I can start off as far as the experience that I'm having here. I think sometimes how do I say this? Just because there's resources doesn't mean those resources are accessible to the population that they're built for, or we think are built for. And also this concept, are we putting them where they go? Like, I would do my students no service if I put all the career services on LinkedIn. They don't go to LinkedIn. And I think we need to ask ourselves, are we putting resources where they're congregating at in those spaces? is it accessible, and is it in those spaces where they already are? And then have we communicated the process, whether it's resumes, applying, application, that, oh, there's also an application and a resume, and those are two totally different things. How to interview, and now we're doing interviews over the phone or over Zoom. What is the professional responsibilities around that? And so it's a full process. And then, are we doing free internships still? Or I should say unpaid? We got to get away from those dynamics. And so putting all those pieces together and asking those questions, continually asking those questions. And Phillip mentioned this way before. Times are changing. Are we changing with the times to be current with how we're offering these resources to the students? And I want to think that we are, but I think that conversation isn't being asked. So how do we know that we are if we're not asking, well, man, COVID hit, things are different, students are operating different, students are looking at the world from a totally different lens. Okay, what lens are they asking it for? But then bringing them into that conversation and letting them speak for themselves versus saying, I think students are thinking this. Let's not do that anymore. Let's actually let students answer for themselves.
And Mario and Andrea, is that part of the mission, the goal of both of your departments that you're serving at your universities? Because that's completely fair, but who is asking the questions? Is that chartered from your organizations, the departments that you support, and ultimately the students that are underrepresented that you're trying to support? Did that question make sense? I'm sorry.
And so, Mary, I think it is something that we look at, right? Now, Mario is asking, are we asking those specific questions from students? And that's something that it may not always be to the student. It may also be to our educational partners. We're hoping to have more interactions also with families and community-based organizations that can help inform our decisions and kind of our focus. Because sometimes with the students, they're interested in the same things that all students are interested, right? Living on campus, playing sports, majoring in specific fields, getting involved. But we're also then able to recognize, okay, what are some other things that we should be proactive about when it comes to our outreach and our recruitment efforts or our retention efforts or just overall support on campus. And so I think this is, for example, today is a great example of like, as a community-based organization, how can we continue to partner so that we can be making decisions while keeping everything in mind that can impact the student and the specific communities.
Thank you so much. I know that we are at time. We're going to pause. I'll hand it back over to Victor, but thank you everyone who did pose a question. They're all important. We'll do our best to either get back to you one-on-one. I know Nick, you'd asked a question. Julia, thank you, but I'm going to pause, give the reins back to Victor, and we're going to hear a little bit from him.
So this, I mean, all these comments are great about opportunities, untapped opportunities, access, rethinking the value of what we consider to be a formal education. And Phillip had some good comments about, opportunities are out there. We just need to find innovative ways to go about it, on the job training, certificate programs, serving the people in need and those industries or segments of our community that need these people. If we can marry those two up, I think we'll be doing a good job. I am going to ask NAACP Treasure Valley President Charles Taylor for a couple of comments. And while he's doing that, I'm going to put up a slide here. I'm going to share a slide with you on the screen. That has contact information for each of our panelists. If you come up with a question that you think you should have answered, or we didn't answer a question that you wanted answered, I'm sure that they'll be able to get in touch with you, give you more information about the institutions they're working for, the work that they're doing, and give you some guidance surrounding today's general topic. President Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Vic, for leading this great conversation. I want to thank also the panelists, Mr. Orozco, Mr. Phillip, Mr. Powell. Thank you for your insight and your discussion and what you view as what we might need to be doing. I think this meeting that you had, this panel been had, is could be well being served. The one question that I would have that we might want to think about is we was talking about a lot of different ways of doing things, especially because of the change. We gotta change the way we're doing because of change of time. And I was wondering, is there any outreach to corporations that you might encourage them to help you get to where you're wanting to be, as far as training people during the high school time frames, or even when they get into college? Most, as I've heard every one of you say, nobody knows where these college student wants to be except them. And I'm wondering, how much time are we spending trying to figure out or assess them to be able to communicate them where they are rather than where the institutions are. But again, that was just my one of the thought process that I had. I'm glad, I'm very, very impressed with the conversation that was held today. I hope we continue to doing these outreach, because I too have some vision for what we need to do for those that is underserved or underprivileged individuals, to get them into the circle and get them also into the conversation. I can remember an old conversation that I had with my elders back in the days, is that I didn't want everybody to tell me what I wanted, was to give me an opportunity to explain to you what I wanted. And I think sometimes we don't give our young people the opportunity to express what they want, how they want to be, or what do they call success. My success and your success may be two different things. And so the student that you serve and you may be two different things, but I think if you bring them to the table and have that conversation, we may be able to move things in a positive direction for both individuals, meaning the both institution or the thing that you serve and the wishes that the student wants to be. Again, I thank you, Vic, for moderating this section of the Lunch and Learn. And I thank all of those that helped to put this together for what you contribute. And that, I'll turn it back over to you, Vic. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, and thank everyone who took time out to share with us today, to log in, especially Phillip, Mario, Andrea. Thank you. I mean, there is there's no telling what the ripple effects of the work that you're doing on a daily basis is, and you already know this. But it's reaping benefits for the residents of Treasure Valley and Idaho on a daily basis. Even, your results are going to be 5, 10, 15 years down the line, as Phillip shared with us, historical context of how these things happen and how things change. Keeping moving in a positive direction for everyone equally in our community, I think is our general goal for each and every one of us. Thank you for sharing your ideas and expertise and knowledge with us today. And I hope each of you has a great afternoon. It's going to be warm out there, so hydrate yourself and go have some fun. Everybody have an excellent day. Take care.
Mm.